And what's good, my people? Welcome into the FFU. It's myself, co-host Jeremy. How you doing, Jeremy?
Man, I'm in rough shape. It's been it's been a long evening of rookie drafts over here in Amsterdam. Things start popping off in the sleeper chat at like 2 a.m. I didn't get any sleep last night. So yeah, perfect for right now. But hey, it's I can't even talk. I'm on such poor amount of sleep. But it is an exciting time for rookies. We finally get to put our research to the test and actually put it into practice by drafting some of these rookies. And the fact that I have 7 drafts going on right now as we speak, and another 3 kicking off in about 24 hours, no big deal. No big deal. We'll figure it out. How are you doing in your rookie drafts?
I'm doing great. Let me tell you, I missed about 800 messages this morning because I'm on the West Coast. And sorry, I'm not getting up at 6 in the fucking morning. Like, y'all can suck my dick. I'm not getting up that early. It's not going to happen. We have, like Jeremy's talking about, a ton of rookie drafts going on right now. We have startups going on because we are degenerates. This is what we do. So if you're tuning in with us, we very much know this is the time of year where the grind on the rookies, it's finally here. It pays off. Hopefully we hit our guys. So that's what the show is going to be about. We're going to be talking about our rookie rankings, how they compare to the Fantasy Pros consensus, where we differ, guys we're higher on, guys we're lower on. Kind of give you our combination with the FFU. It's only half of us, but it's the good half, I'll just say. You know what I'm saying? We're missing 2, but that's okay. We got 2. So 2 is better than that. So that's kind of what our goal of this show is. So we're gonna hop into these rookies and go for round 1, round 2, and then really give you like guys we're higher on and guys we're lower on. And newsflash, like I have quite a few guys I'm higher and lower on. We were talking about this pre-show. Jeremy has quite a few guys as well too. So let's kick it off. Jeremy, why don't you run us through your round 1, and if you have any tier breaks in that round 1 and where it goes through.
Yeah, sure. So in round 1, I have 4 tier breaks. So we start with my 1, 2, 3 is I think relatively standard, but it depends what you think about Jaden Daniels. So I'm Caleb Williams at 1, Marvin Harrison at 2, and Malik Neighbors at 3, and that is my top tier. I get the feelings about Jaden Daniels. For me, there's a little bit of uncertainty just with his overall profile. We know he's a running quarterback. We know the hit rates are a little bit difficult. We know he takes a ton of sacks and he needs to clean up a little bit. But he also won the Heisman Trophy, right? We can't hate on him too much. He's my number 4 and my clear number 4 at the top of the second tier. But yeah, I want those 2 wide receivers before I want any other quarterback. But it's Caleb at 1 for me. And then so tier 2 is Daniels at 4, JJ McCarthy at 5 over your boy Rome Odunze at 6. I haven't had the opportunity. I haven't fallen in that 105 yet to make that choice of JJ over those guys. But I don't know. It would be interesting to kind of see how that happens in practice. I think in most cases it would be a difficult decision, but yeah, unless I was super quarterback heavy there, I would probably take JJ there at the 5. So Rome is at 6 for me. And then tier 3, I have Brock Bowers. Really only the landing spot kind of knocks him down a peg, but he's pretty much where we had him pre-processed because Drake May falls down for me. He's my number 8 overall. I think he's got an opportunity. I'm just not sure. I've been hurt before by this Mac Jones type of good old boy coming into New England on my team and destroying us. I mean, we got a better situation presumably for him here, but I don't know. Something about this has Bo Callahan vibes. Something about bringing your boys to the draft instead of good old mom and dad. Like, what are we doing here, Drake May? Get on that football field, get in the building, and show me some good stuff. And but right now it's a slight concern. But May at 8 for me. And I think that's pretty much consensus top 8, depending on how you order them. But for me, it's always been Xavier Worthy at 9. And then Jonathan Brooks, who has kind of fluctuated throughout the process. But the landing spot, I think we all agree he belongs here in the first round, and he's my 10. And that's the end of my third tier. And then finally, In my fourth tier, I have a lot of guys, but I have Lad McConkey at 11. I just absolutely love that landing spot. Really like the player. And this one has been so difficult for me. I'm even looking at it and I'm not certain about it. And I think I'm going to change it here live. I'm going to go a little spicy here, maybe, and put Keon Coleman at 12. He was at 13 for me. But I think Coleman at 12, just the opportunity is insane. My issue with Coleman is his separation, right? We know that that's a big concern, but we saw him do a lot of interesting and like really good things at the combine. He showed he's got the chops. His tape is awesome in terms of like the contested catch stuff. So you can't knock on him. And we had Pat Fitzmaurice on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he absolutely sold me on the Keon Coleman love. So the fact that he landed in Buffalo in basically the first round, that right, they would have taken him at 32 if they didn't do that little switcheroo with Carolina there. So Keon Coleman for me is my 12, just because I think he just steps in right away. And he's the number 2 target on that team immediately. So Keon Coleman for me is the 12, just over Ricky Pearsall. But we love Pearsall, but we don't love the landing spot. So that's where I am. So let me run through it again real quick. Caleb, Marvin, Malik. That's my top 3. Jaden Daniels, McCarthy, and Odunze, 4, 5, 6. Then it's Bowers, May, Worthy, Brooks. And then it's Lad McConkey and somehow Keon Coleman.
We're back, baby. It goes full circle, right? Yeah, I struggle specifically with Coleman. Newsflash, he did not make my top 12. He's a little bit outside of it. I'll start it out at 1. Everyone knows what I've been talking about for the last 2 years. It's a guy to himself. It's Caleb Williams. I'm not putting anyone else alongside him. I know everyone loves Marvin Harrison. Like, they want to put him in 101. And I've seen that happen in some drafts, and I'm just like, what are we doing, folks? I get it if you are in like smaller leagues of 10-team leagues and you're worried about the quarterback being the true difference maker and you want to take Marvin Harrison Jr., you can do that 101. Like, I understand. But if it's a 12-team league, like, people are still going to value this quarterback. So Caleb Williams, he's the first tier of himself. I do not care. I don't want anybody else. So if you're going to come at me if you have the 102, you better pay up if you're getting Caleb Williams from me, because he's already valued, as we saw. Like, he's basically a turn pick in the dynasty startup we're doing right now. He went really, really early. So that's the cost. The cost to get him, it is what it is. My tier 2 goes from 2 to 8. So it's a decent set of players. It's Jaden Daniels at 2. This might be a little spicy. I stepped Drake May 3. So I know we've talked about Drake May. People are all over the place and they don't know how to value him. Newsflash, I just got him at the 109 in one of my rookie drafts. And I was like, what are we doing here, folks? This is bunker. So like, I'm pushing these quarterbacks up. I believe in the talent. Like, Jaden Daniels just won Heisman. Drake May, his 2022 season is among the best of anyone in this class. I get it. Last year was a lot, but both Drake May and Caleb Williams were asked to do everything for their offenses. So they were asked to do more than what you typically see from these top 5 quarterbacks, guys that go this early. And I know we'll get to JJ McCarthy. I just think Drake May's a better player. So you can push JJ McCarthy up if you want. Like, his sliding situation is good. I think the Patriots situation is not bad. They've rearranged that wide receiver room. They do have some decent talent in the running back room. Like, they've kind of brought back their players, so they have decent skill players. And then they took a couple shots at the rookie picks. By the way, I like his wide receiver 1 there. I think that's a great fit with what Drake May does. The Jalen Polk pick. Like, I know we talk about Baker being over him, but I think that's just nonsense. Like, I think Jalen Polk could be an impact guy in year 1 in that offense and be a good guy for a skill set that matches up. So it goes Drake May 3, and then I have the wide receivers all together. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. at pick 4. I have Rome Odunze at pick 5 and Malik Neighbors at pick 6. I've gone back and forth on Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze about 15 times at this point. I'm probably still going to go back and forth depending on what I'm looking for. If you want to chase the upside, go after Malik Neighbors, because he has the path to his bajillion targets in year 1. Like, he could legit get 150 targets. It's just going to be real ugly and really inefficient. So you kind of have to be like on that side with him. Rome Odunze, it's the opposite. He's not going to get all the targets in the world, but he's going to be a lot more efficient because he's not going to have to do anything. So, well, the difference maker is he's tied with Caleb Williams. I'm fine with that. I don't want to wish cast like we did with Drake May and Garrett Wilson the last couple of years, where we're hoping for these guys to get a quarterback. It finally happened for Drake London. If it didn't happen for Drake London, though, we'd be in the same situation. And this is my fear with Malik Neighbors, is he might be giving you 11 points per game on 150 targets. And if he's doing that, it's so frustrating. But he's going to hold value. I'm not worried about him. I just think the landing situation for my guy Rome Odunze is a little bit better. So I'm going to take him over there. But everyone's taking Malik Neighbors well above where I have him. So like it never has been a discussion for me. It's either I've missed out on Rome and it's like I just can't even get Malik Neighbors because he goes that early. So I guess I'm a little bit lower on him. And then rounding out 2 tier, I have JJ McCarthy, who is my fourth quarterback. He's a pick 7. Like I love the landing spot. I think he's a talented player. All he has to do is basically be just a solid NFL quarterback and he'll put up fancy points for you. The reason why I don't have him up with Drake May is I just worry about the ceiling and what they're going to ask him to do. And if he's a good enough quarterback to give you difference-making potential. So that's why he's pick 7. I'm fine with him there. And then pick 8, Brock Bowers. I've gone back and forth on moving him. But realistically, when I kind of think it through, I don't know if there was a landing spot outside of the Chargers where you could talk yourself into Brock Bowers being the 1 or 2 on the team with a good quarterback. So kind of like playing that through in my head, it's like he's just such a good tight end. Like I'm not worried about him. It might not be the best thing in the world. By the way, it sucks for his buddy Michael Mayer, the tight end everybody loved last year.
Oh.
Like he's just gonna be blocking a lot more. They'll run a lot of 2 tight end sets. Like this is hard. Like this is what they do with the Raiders, and they're just gonna flex him out. So he's gonna kind of play like a slot wide receiver, big slot role. Which, by the way, that fits Brock Bowers perfectly. Like he could do that very well. So I think we're kind of devaluing Brock Bowers a little bit too much. So he's the end of tier 2 for me. He rounds it out. I'd be happy just to sit there and pick 8 if he goes there, and just go do that. Now tier 3 is Jonathan Brooks. He's the guy. I've almost kind of put him in a tier of his own, but the injury discount, like we don't know when he's coming back. Like I could talk as good as the situation as possible. It's like the injury's still there, so he's picked 9. And then it's Brian Thomas Jr. and Xavier Worthy back to back. I don't care if you want to put Xavier Worthy over Brian Thomas Jr. I legit don't care the difference between these 2 guys. They're both kind of risky profile bets in good offenses, and I think Brian Thomas Jr. actually has the better path to being the true number 1 guy than Xavier Worthy does, because Xavier Worthy, very similar player to Hollywood, and they also have Rashee Rice, who's a guy that's going to live underneath, so I'm not sure how it's going to work out for Xavier Worthy, but it would not surprise me at all to see Brian Thomas Jr. have a much better season than him. But realistically, like you could pick those guys however you want to go. Those guys are back to back. They kind of the top of that tier. And then we get Bo Nix. He's my pick 12, and that rounds out my first round. So Bo Nix rounds it out. I get it. Like I'm not a fan of Bo Nix, but he's a starting quarterback. And the way I look at this is what happens if Bo Nix is actually good, and that's my whole question, right? Everyone's just like, oh, Denver sucks. What happens if he does a lot of what he did at Oregon, right? They short passing game, they do the get it out quick, they take decisions out of his hands, and he's a good producer. The opportunity cost of getting a starting quarterback there, like it's really not that high. So I know I've gotten in some like significant discussions on Discord or other places about this where people are like, oh, I'm not taking Bo Nix. And I'm like, dude, you're not so rare to do. And we're notoriously bad at quarterback evaluation. So it's like a 50-50 shot with these round 1 guys, right? So 50-50 chance he is good. Like we talked about this with Herbert and other guys. We kind of discount them too much. I'm not saying he's Herbert. That's not what I'm saying. But like if he is good, that pick more than pays for itself, because the opportunity cost of the players who like I'll tell you who I round out this tier with is like Lad McConkey and Ricky Pearsall. If Bo Nix is good, he's going to be worth so much more than those guys. Like there's a world where he's worth double what those guys are. But this is kind of like where I'm just going to default to quarterback and go there. Now it's a risky bet. Quarterback is risky, and you kind of have to accept that. By the way, round 1 wide receivers late in that range, those are also risky bets. So it's a lot of risky bets with these guys. I'm just going to chase the opportunity cost of the quarterback. So that's kind of how my 3rd tier rounds out. So that's where I'm at with it. And you can kind of see we're very similar around 1. Like we have a few guys we're a little bit lower and higher on. But overall, like it's kind of I would expect people to imagine this is how these rounds would go out if they were kind of guessing, predicting how it would play out. Like we had that top 8 going in. It got shuffled a little bit, but it's all kind of the same guy. And then it's just, pick what you prefer, like round the later in there and go from there.
Yeah, 100%. Just to talk about Bo Nix for a second, it's interesting to think about. Like, I totally agree with your take. I'm not going to be that bullish on him, only because, and again, I think I'm not going to sit here and just continue to spout off Andrew Cooper's research, but, go back and listen to the tape. But it's just so interesting that, after the second QB taken off the board, in this case, Jaden Daniels in the NFL draft, all those other QBs, the hit rates for those guys to have elite QB seasons is minuscule, right? So, certainly, Bo Nix could slot in as a high-end QB2, right? That's not out of the realm of conversation after a couple of years, but it is set up for him too, right? That's the interesting part here. We talk about JJ McCarthy having a good landing spot. We talk about, obviously, Caleb Williams having one of the best landing spots of a 101 ever, right? But look, we don't love the Denver Broncos, but Sean Payton is no slouch unless you believe Drew Brees made him, which is possible, right? But Cortland Sutton, we know he's great in the red zone. We know he has the ability to grab contested catches. Marvin Mims flashed last year. We have Bo Nix's college teammate who the production was off the charts for Troy Franklin, taken in the fourth round, but later than many thought that he should go. So that's potentially a steal if you look at it that way. Josh Reynolds is in town. Tim Patrick is potentially healthy along with Greg Dulcich, right? So and they have the running backs, right? They have Javonte Williams, Esteme's in town. I think we still have P. Ryan in the building, Jaleel McLaughlin. We like, right? So there's the ability here for not only the Broncos to run a functional offense, but if Bo Nix is any good, if he can check down a little bit to the McLaughlin types or find Dulcich in the flat a little bit more than, some of the guys streaking downfield, he can actually make a name for himself as one of the better rookie quarterbacks this season. And right now he's slotting at 5 for you, 6 for me, right? He could easily be the second best rookie quarterback of this season. So at the 112, yeah, it's a good argument to have, I think.
Yeah, and if somebody wants to take Penix above it, I'm totally fine with it. It's just know yourself as a manager. Are you comfortable waiting 2 years with that pick? Like we saw this with Jordan Love play out. His value just absolutely tanked, and it finally rebounded when he was good. So, like, this is the thing we talk about Penix. Like, you have to be content just sitting on that pick for years. I know as hell I'm not doing that. Like, that's not me as a manager at all. So that's why I'm dropping him down, because, like, I know myself is right. If you were content, like, just chilling and waiting on him, you can take him in that range. I'll be fine with that, because, like, people have talked about it. It's like a future first is, like, how they're viewing it. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. It's just that's technically true. It's just I just don't want to wait. So, personally, that's why he's my 5. But, yeah, if you want to put him at 5 – or, sorry, he's my 6. If you want to put him at 5, I get it. It's just know yourself as a manager. And I think that a lot of times people struggle with that. So, like, know how you treat these rookie picks. If you want to take the hit on the wide receiver, go for the wide receiver. Like, you know what I'm saying? You can take the Lad McConkey, the Ricky Pearsall, all those, Keon Coleman. You can take those guys above the quarterback if you want to. I'm personally not doing it. But, yeah, it makes sense in that range of picks. Like, just know what you're chasing and how you want to go after that.
Yeah, and I think that's another good point too, right? Is you want to personally, again, knowing myself, I'm always looking a year out, right? Mm-hmm. So in Dynasty, I know we've heard the term a lot. I hear Dynasty nerds saying this all the time: 3-year window, right? Lots of people are promoting the 3-year window. For me, it's a 2-year window, right? Because I'm okay with the first year. I'm okay with the JSN not living up to expectations in year 1. I saw flashes. I feel good about JSN. JSN needs to prove something to me in year 2, right? That production needs to, from a fantasy perspective, that production needs to go up. And there's a lot of talk right now about Rome Odunze potentially being in a similar situation. Believe what you want about the players and their differences or similarities, but it is a similar situation where you have 2 kind of entrenched veteran wide receivers, although it's a bit different because we have rookie quarterbacks and rapport isn't there. But, Rome Odunze could face a JSN-like barrier to entry in terms of the number of targets he's going to see in year 1. I'm okay with that, but then I need to see it in year 2. So whether Keenan Allen kind of falls off a cliff or retires or what have you, or, Rome just kind of automatically assumes that, I need to see that play out sooner rather than later. So I'm more of a 2-year window guy. And in that case, I'm happy with a Keon Coleman, who I think is going to see the opportunity right away, over a guy like Ricky Pearsall, who I love the player. I love his game. But I'm worried because, San Francisco's in that win now window. They haven't shown a desire, even though many think they should, to trade away Ayuk and Debo. They're going to be faced with some tough contract decisions coming up soon. But, is Pearsall really going to step in and be the one right away? What's happening with George Kittle? How long is he going to play? So there's a lot there that makes me kind of shy away slightly from Pearsall, even though I think he's the better prospect, and put Keon Coleman over him because, he's got one of the best QBs in the game. And if he can just kind of ad lib with Josh Allen and find a way to get open, he's going to have a ton of targets coming his way.
Yeah, I think you make a great point with Pearsall. And as much as I love the landing spot situation, like, he's buried. Like they have the best skill position talent in the league, and then they just add a first round wide receiver, and then they take another wide receiver, Jacob Cowling, around 4 later. So they clearly wanted to insulate this wide receiver room. I'm assuming maybe they were trying to trade Debo and Ayuk because we had all this to talk about it. But newsflash, they did not. So you kind of have to take that in consideration with these picks. So I'm probably going to move him back into the Leggett, Coleman, Polk type tier of range of players. I think it just makes a lot more sense there. And if you talk about sitting on the player, if you want to sit on Pearsall, the thing that sucks is he's not young. So like that's the hard part with the first round wide receiver. They're not like he's probably not going to play that much in year one. Like, are you comfortable sitting on him? If you are, then yeah. But like just take consideration how the dynasty market's going to treat that too, because that's the other aspect of this. It's like production and or value, and we have to determine the difference between the two of them. I just think Pearsall's a great player in a great situation. It's just we don't know when that situation is going to come and like be fruitful for him. Maybe one of those guys in front of him gets injured, but then he's like he's like the fourth option on his team. Like it's just you talk yourself into it where you're like, oh, it's great. But then same player, you're like, oh, it sucks at the same time, right? So like I'm fine chasing the Leggettes, the Colemans, those guys above Pearsall if you want to go for year one, because they have the upside shot in year one and the offense may not be as good. But like Coleman's attached to Josh Allen, like that's really good potential to be a good player in that offense. And then Leggett, like I think Leggett's more interesting. We can kind of get into this with him.
Yep.
He's gonna more play the big slot role in that offense. Like I think it sucks for Adam Thielen. Like I think he's basically coming in to replace Adam Thielen's job because Leggett's also a guy that struggles on the outside. Like that's not really what he does. So you have Deontay Johnson, he's gonna be the target runner there, and then it goes down, and you're like, all right, how does this work for them? So I think where do you have Leggett in your rankings? Actually, let me ask you that.
Yeah, so these are, and this is the whole thing that we're trying to consider. So my entire tier 4, I started off with 11, 12. That was Ladd and Keon Coleman. And then it goes all the way through pick 17. And those guys for me are 13. I have Trey Benson, right? We're talking about, again, 2-year window. I'm hoping end of year 1, year 2, he's taking over for a seemingly, Terminator, James Conner. He just won't die. But then for me, it's 14 Pearsall. It still might be a little too high. 15 Brian Thomas Jr. And I want to talk about him after Leggett. But he's in front of Leggett. Leggett is 16 for me. And then Troy Franklin at 17 before I get to the quarterbacks, Penix and Nix. So yeah. So, and again, this is super flex. I agree with the points you're making, but those wide receivers for me are either great prospects or in great situations to within 2 years become high target earners and be able to produce solidly for fantasy football. But let's talk about Leggett. So he's 17 for me. So that's right in the middle of round 2. He's probably going to go a little bit higher because he has that first round draft capital. I'm okay missing out on him just because he's such a project. He's a sexy project, but we've seen a lot of these projects kind of come into the NFL and fall off. You really need to find yourself not only in a good situation where there's not a lot of entrenched, superstars around you, but you need to be in a good situation with the coaching staff too, right? Dave Canales, I think he's shown nothing but, positive traits as a coach. He was one of the most coveted head coaches in this process, right? All of that makes sense. All of that looks good. The Carolina Panthers, the problem there is maybe not necessarily the inexperienced coaching staff, but the owner, David Tepper. And we've seen all these things come out about him over the last few years. That's almost an Arthur Blank taking Michael Penix 8th overall level of, incompetence in terms of ownership with David Tepper, although different, right? So you just don't know what's going to happen there with Leggett. Will Mingo develop? I don't know. I'm not betting on that, but you mentioned the guys before. Deontay Johnson is clearly there. Bryce Young had his incredible struggles last year. We got Jonathan Brooks there, and look, maybe they hang on to Miles Sanders. Maybe they have room, and it's just pound the football as much as possible with a 3-headed backfield. Right. And then, you got Jatavian Sanders, who's capable enough at the position. And, that's all you really need. So if you go run heavy, you try to help Bryce Young develop in his second year, you probably don't need, Leggett to do much at all. And if you're looking at him as a project, you might not expect him to. So that's kind of my concern there with him. I think the upside is absolutely insane. He's a monster. He's fast as hell. But the problem is guys who come in who are massive projects, that for me is is a big red flag, because more often than not they miss.
Yeah, like we talk about teams' inability to develop talent, like that's clearly on display with so many teams. So, like, I get it. I'm the one that stands out to me in your tier 4 rankings is Troy Franklin, and because he's a 4th round pick. Can you hit on that a little bit? Because I have him. I'll let you know. I have him at my pick 29, so I have him well in like round 3 range of my players, just because I know we like the profile. The analytical profile is very nice, but when a team takes a guy around 4, there's no guaranteed pathway to playing time with that player. So like we talk about Leggett and Coleman, those guys, they're going to be on the field. They're going to try to get them as much touch as possible. With round 4 guys, like I listed every round 4 guy taken the past decade. It's basically Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Crowder are the 2 guys that have been impact fantasy assets the past decade from round 4. So I just worry like he's that analytical darling. We did this a couple years ago with Tyler Johnson on the Bucks, where everybody's like, "Oh, the profile is great," but he just washed out of the league. And I think he's a better Troy Franklin's a better player than him. I'm not sure he's going to see the field over Marvin Mims. I'm not sure he's going to see the field over Courtland Sutton. And like they have Greg Dulcich. I'm curious to see how his role plays out. So I'm more just like letting other people take him in that range. Like if you want to take him, go for it, because the opportunity cost you're giving up drafting him compared to other guys. Like I have Penix in that range. I have Jalen Polk in that range. I have Trey Benson in that range. I have Leggett, Coleman, and Pearsall. Those are the other like those players. Like the bet I'm making feels so much safer to me. Like I just feel like that at that cost, like there's so much risk associated with Troy Franklin. So can you kind of hit on why you're so comfortable taking Troy Franklin in that range of players?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. First, you hit on it right away. The production profile was amazing, right? Troy Franklin and Bo Nix have that connection. Troy Franklin and Bo Nix have the opportunity to have that connection again. Sean Payton is a madman. We know for whatever reason he hates every single person who was on that Denver Broncos team last year. He got rid of as many as possible in this offseason. We know that he probably doesn't really like Greg Dulcich that much, right? Whether he's healthy or not. Adam Troutman, tight end 1 season. Let's go in Denver. What are we doing, Sean Payton? I don't know. I don't trust Sean Payton, but I do trust the connection that Bo Nix and Troy Franklin have, and I think he was drafted for a reason. We mention, all the time day 3 draft capital, and that's valid. There were 100 picks in days 1 and 2 in the draft. Troy Franklin was picked 102 at the very beginning of day 3. So technically, yes, he's a day 3 pick, but I'm happy to kind of overlook that because look, that we have a insanely deep wide receiver class. We have teams that are filling need. Like I don't think Malachi Corley is a better wide receiver than Troy Franklin. I think the Jets were out to fill a need, right? They wanted that, short to intermediate slot Randall Cobb type guy to fill a role. There are a lot of picks that came in before Franklin that I think Franklin's just a better player. So the fact that I think he fell where he shouldn't have, that guys were taken over him who shouldn't have been. The fact that he's paired with his college quarterback, and the fact that he's in a position where, Courtland Sutton, yes, but he's a good, catches touchdowns. He's a good contested catch guy, but the separation just isn't there. It's not going to magically appear, right? One thing that Troy Franklin has is speed. And he runs decent routes, but he's definitely going to beat you with speed. And if you look at the way that Denver might set up this offense, certainly you're going to want to focus on the running game. You could run 3 wide, but even if you run 2 wide, right, it's potentially possible that Troy Franklin beats out Marvin Mims. Maybe not from a talent perspective, but just from the perspective of Bo Nix having that level of comfort with him and having that rapport that he's just going to look. I think these guys both come into camp and they pick up where they left off, and they just start. All we're going to be hearing all summer is, Bo Nix. Troy Franklin is Bo Nix's favorite receiver. Like, of course he is, right? Like, obviously, Bo Nix is coming in. He's green. He doesn't know what Sean Payton is like screaming in his ear. He's learning one of the most complex playbooks in the NFL. What's he going to do? He's just going to default to what he knows, and he's going to say, "Oh, that guy's open. I know that guy. Get him the football." So I think that's going to be the narrative. And I think despite the 4th round draft capital, that Troy Franklin is going to be a guy who's, again, within a 2-year window is going to be able to succeed and become the second target, at least on that team, and won't just be a field stretching guy.
There's also the one guy who's kind of missing that's coming back from an injury, who's kind of a big slot in that offense is the other, and I'm blanking on his name.
Patrick, Tim Patrick.
Patrick, yeah, Tim Patrick. He's the other guy in that offense too that I think is kind of like we kind of forget about him too. So like I'm just not as like I was lower on Troy Franklin in the process to begin with than like our group was.
Same.
So it makes sense why personally I'm not more willing to take that bet just because I was like a guy I had a lot higher on him was Jalen McMillan. Like I like what McMillan does, and personally like I still have him above Troy Franklin just because like what we do with these guys that we like that go later in the draft is you talk yourself into it because you're like, all right, here's what needs to go right for them, and that's just my whole issue with these late round picks where they need a lot to go right. And it certainly could go. It could go right. Like it could all work out in his favor. He could be a very good player. I just am worried with guys like that who go late in the process. At wide receiver in particular, it's just so difficult for those guys to get on the field. If he could prove me wrong, like early on in the process, get on the field and he's playing with like the first group, then like that kind of changes it, right? But if we don't hear that drumbeat out of training camp, then it's kind of like, okay, when's he going to get on the field? And maybe it comes along late in year one with like Sean Payton talk about he's trading up for his guy. But I don't understand this offense because you take Bo Nix, who's a short area passer, gets it out quick, and they get all of these guys who are either underneath or they stretch the field deep. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like this is Mims is the fucking same profile as Troy Franklin. It's a lot of short stuff, slants underneath, and then it's going deep. And I'm like, you have nobody in the middle of the field. Like I don't know is Dulcich that guy? He hated.
He
Dulcich
was
last year,
2
right?
years. I know he was 2 years ago.
I don't understand what like the overall process is in Denver. This is the most confusing thing to me. And like I've heard a lot of people talk about how good the Denver situation is for Bo Nix. I just don't know. But like at the late round one cost, I'm okay making that bet. But like if we're talking ourselves with Bo Nix and like this hits on that, being in the like because it's Sean Payton, like you need to be very careful of how you treat these players because of the head coach, right? Because they have offensive coordinator and sometimes they shift personnel and do that. So we just have to be I think we just have to be very careful with some of these players. But like I'm fine in the mid second if someone wants to do a Troy Franklin, like that's where you have him. I think 17 is what 205 range. So that's the pick, right? Like that is understandable and I get it. Just personally, it's not for me. So if you like a guy, like I'm more like early round 3, that's where I would be okay taking a shot at. But 205, like that's fine. It's the hit rates are not that great in the mid second, and this is the more process we get to where it's like, all right, like why do you have that guy so high? If you have a valid reason and it makes a lot of sense, then go get your guy because once we get to the late second, like hit rates dramatically fall off with rookie picks, right? So the opportunity costs, like we'll talk about this later with like Vidal and Tracy, those running backs, like cost nothing. So just go get your guy in that range. But I'll round out how the tier 4 goes for me. It's Ricky Pearsall's pick 14, Legette's 15, Keon Coleman is 16, Michael Penix is 17. Jalen Polk is 18 and Troy Benson is 19. So Troy Benson is the other running back in this class that I'm somewhat confident will get a role. The other guys, like I'm not as confident, so that's why they're lower. I think he has a shot behind James Conner, and like we know Conner's old. So there's a lot of you can talk yourself into Troy Benson. I'm fine. I think he's a good running back. That's okay. With Penix, why I differentiated between Polk as Coleman and Legette is I don't know how Polk's going to be used. I have a good idea, but I'm just not sure. So I'm okay taking Penix right in that range, that 205, like pick 17 where you're talking about 205. That's where I'm okay pulling the trigger. If you want to put Polk or Benson above him, I have no issue with that. But that's kind of how my tier 4 rounds out. Let's jump into the tier 5 and like the end of the second round. So I'll tell you how the end of the second round goes for me. It goes Marshawn Lloyd, Blake Corum, Jalen Wright. You see a lot of running backs here for a reason. Roman Wilson and Jermaine Burton. Now, while I like Wilson right there is because he's going to be on the field. I don't think I'm not a huge fan of his profile, but he's going to be on the field because Pittsburgh wide receiver core is absolutely atrocious. I know people have talked themselves into certain guys on that team. Roman Wilson's coming in and take that slot job. Like that's his role from day one. I think he will be a valid NFL player. I don't think he has a high ceiling, but at the end of the second round, like you're getting an NFL player, totally fine with that cost. The running backs with Lloyd, Corum, and Wright, it's all very similar. They have guys in front of them. They're all good. It's like some of the better offenses in the league. We just don't know how it's going to shake out for those guys. So that's why Benson separates it, is because I see him playing a role. Those guys, not so much. So for you, kind of, how does that stack up to you with the end of your second round? Is it a little bit different for you?
Yeah, but two guys who are the same. Marshawn Lloyd, so he's in my 20. I really love, and let's talk about him for a second, right? He's buried behind Josh Jacobs. I don't care. There's the potential that Josh Jacobs is washed. I don't believe it, but it's at least a potential, and it's a narrative because we saw what played out last year. There's the potential that Josh Jacobs only has a year or two left, depending on what the team decides to do and move on to him. Restructuring contracts is a very common thing, right? It's possible Green Bay came into this draft and didn't expect to draft Marshawn Lloyd. It's just that he fell in a place where they were comfortable with him. We know they shouldn't be comfortable in AJ Dillon. They proved that they're not comfortable with AJ Dillon by drafting Marshawn Lloyd. So I don't think it's an indictment on Jacobs, but it's possible that Lloyd can take over the role sooner rather than later, or at least work a timeshare the way that we all assumed AJ Dillon would at one point in his career. That never materialized. But the other thing is this team is awesome, right? Jordan Love, I'm a huge believer. I just took him 111 in a startup rookie draft. That's right where I think he belongs. I mean, I'm planting my flag on Jordan Love. He's got the situation. He had the time to sit. That he's got the coaching staff and system in place. He's the real deal. And that offense has proven that they're going to move the football. And whether you have Jacobs or Lloyd or both kind of putting the ball in the end zone, right, they're not going to throw it. And one of the things that, the Packers have in Love that, for example, a Buffalo Bills running back doesn't have, or, a Philadelphia Eagles running back doesn't have, is these, the quarterback stealing these goal line touchdowns. So they've got two hammers now, and they're going to be handing the ball to one of those two guys at the goal line. We're not worried about Jordan Love stealing that. So, we were all in love with Zach Charbonnet last year because we assumed it was going to be a 1A, 1B. That didn't materialize in year one, but, Pete Carroll, and say what you will about Seattle and all of the rookie hate that used to exist there. Here we have, a young head coach who's more than happy to kind of let, a ton of rookie wide receivers run wild on the field as he proved last year. So I don't think there's going to be an issue here with Lloyd seeing the field as if he's good enough. And I think you're going to want to spell Jacobs, at least with, the massive workload he's had in the NFL thus far. So, by the end of the season, Lloyd working 50-50, I see that as highly probable. And then next year, who knows, maybe Lloyd becomes the 1A. Certainly by year 3, I'm comfortable with him being the lead back, regardless of situation. And if he's the lead back with 3 years developed Jordan Love, with them figuring out the balance in that offense, with them kind of trading and jettisoning some of those younger wide receivers and figuring out who's the best in that group. I mean, Green Bay will be in, perennially in the NFC Championship Super Bowl conversation, and Marshawn Lloyd will be the lead back.
Yeah, I mean, there's a pathway that works. With the $9 million dead cap hit, I don't know how likely it is they move up from Jacobs. I think the way it works is if Jacobs just is not good. Like, if we get what we got last year with Jacobs again, they're just like, all right, like, we tried it, it's not going to work. I had a discussion with a few guys on Twitter where we were going back and forth on this, and I'm like, why are we so sure he's going to see the field in year one? Like, the draft capital is decent. Like, it's very much up to him to prove it. And what's nice about the situation is Green Bay is like, it's going to cure up some of those vision issues we talk about. Like, that's been the post. And this gets into Jalen Wright. It's like two guys that I think are very good players. The vision issues are there. And we saw the post from Scott Barrett talking about everything's great, but then the vision's Helen Keller type stuff. Like, that is kind of my worry with these guys. But if you're in a good offense, which both of those guys are a good offense with Wright and Lloyd, and like a good offensive line, Miami rebuilt the offensive line, so it should be a little better this year. It helps these guys out, and that's what you're doing. Like, I don't think any one of these guys is close to a perfect running back, but they're good running backs. It's like 80% complete, give or take. Maybe a little bit more with Lloyd than Wright. Like, I'm a little bit more bullish on Lloyd than him. But it's a good running back in a good offense and a good scheme. So, like, that's kind of why I'm chasing those 3 running backs, and Corum as well too. I think it's very similar. We talk about with LA with Jacobs and Corum, with Jacobs and Kyron Williams. It's the same thing. You're bringing someone else into that backfield because, newsflash, they didn't like who was behind him. This is why they drafted AJ Dillon's replacement, because the guys are just not good back there, right? They had Ronnie Rivers. They had like the ghost of Zach Evans doing whatever Zach Evans was doing there, where he wasn't getting on the field and people liked him. I think these guys are set up to at least be primary handcuffs in good offenses. And if you're getting that in the late second round pick, the opportunity cost, like, that's a good pick. Like, you're getting it. People may think like, oh, he's just a handcuff. But what happens if the guy in front of him gets injured, right? And then you're stepping into that lead back role. That's how these picks become more valuable. So then you could always trade them off, or you could ride them out for the season. So I think at that cost, like we talk about, I really have a hard time differentiating between Lloyd, Corum, and Wright. Like it's all kind of similarities of what they're asked to do and what they're going to be. So that's why I clump them together, because it's a lot of the same thing we're talking about with all these guys. Like Achane Mostert's up in front of Miami. Like we have Corum and going into there, and then we have Jacobs in front of Lloyd in Green Bay. So overall, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and I totally get that from a running back perspective, and agree with that, except Marshawn Lloyd. I love his spot a lot more. But I want to move on to two more guys that I have at the back end of the second round. Jesse already mentioned him in Roman Wilson. So Roman Wilson is my overall 23. Again, we don't necessarily love the player as much as we love the landing spot. It's George Pickens and nobody else. Stop playing the Pat Freiermuth game, right? We have Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris who are going to take some targets, but Russell Wilson is not washed. Russell Wilson is not what he once was. So maybe he's washed from like the elite all-pro, perennial all-pro that he was at the very beginning of his season, but he's not a washed quarterback. He's going to run a functional offense. That's something that Pittsburgh did not have last year. Arthur Smith, for as much as we hate him as an offensive coordinator, he's going to focus on balancing the offense, on focusing on the running attack so that the play action is there, so that Russell Wilson has a comfortable pocket. And what did Pittsburgh do in terms of the pass catchers? In this draft and in the offseason, the only thing that they did is they jettisoned Deontay Johnson and his 140 targets a season, and they brought in Roman Wilson. That's it. George Pickens, I don't think he's a 1. I think he's a phenomenal talent. I don't think he's a 1. He works better for me as a 2. George Pickens will tell you differently for sure. Lots of other fantasy managers will tell you differently for sure. But he's the 1 over Roman Wilson here. That's fine. But Roman Wilson, I think, still has the opportunity to gain all those targets. So that's why situationally, I'm going to take him at the back of the second. But the guy we need to talk about, who's my overall 24, the 212 and Superflex rookie draft, Ben Sinnott of the Washington Commanders. Ben Sinnott needs even more love than he's getting from the fantasy community today, because he's getting a lot of it and he needs more of it, right? Terry McLaurin, we know, is going to be the alpha there. Outside of McLaurin, there is nobody. Antonio Gibson took his talents elsewhere. They're in New England. I don't know what we're going to do with them. But, he had a fair amount of target volume. We know that Brian Robinson isn't going to be commanding a ton of targets. Really, the only other logical target earner there is Ben Sinnott. Now, Jaden Daniels is a rookie. Is it going to happen for Sinnott where he's going to pop off in year 1? Unlikely, I think. But he's going to show the flashes that's going to help him retain his value, and he's going to grow in that offense. And if there's one thing that Sinnott can do, it's a couple of things, and it's catch the football and run precise routes. And at the tight end position, if he's being covered by safeties, if he's being covered by a linebacker, he's already proven he's going to win that battle. So you put him in offense, you feature him, and he's a good enough blocker to stay on the field, but he's not such a tremendous blocker that he's going to be called on to block all the time. And I love that for him. And his situation in Washington, he can grow with a rookie quarterback. Terry McLaurin is 28, 29 years old at this point, right? He's getting up there. So they're going to have to do a lot of replacing. And so really, the only thing that you're going to have in Washington, the only continuity that you're going to see is Jaden Daniels and Ben Sinnott. And if the Heisman winner is worth anything, which I think we need to put a lot of stock into that, I think he's going to be able to, create space in the running game, and then subsequently through the threat of the run, create space in the passing game. Sinnott can ad lib, can catch the football. So he's in an awesome spot. He is our clear tight end 2. And at the back of the second, 211, even 212, super comfortable. And he's, for the most part, he's been there. I think the 210, maybe 209 is the earliest I've seen him go. So if you're right in that range, you're tight end needy, tight end premium, like smash that button.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. It's very interesting that both he and McBride last year are dealing with the ghost of Zach Ertz in front of them. And I'm just so curious why Washington even felt the need to sign him. But They really wanted to solidify that room with some like veterans. So like I understand the thought process of them. But at some point, Ben Snott is going to overtake Zach Ertz because it's just, Zach Ertz is no longer what he was. He's a walking wounded injury guy who's just he's a body. He can help. I think he can help mold Ben Snott and help improve him as a player and how to show him the ropes and do that way. So I think it might take a few weeks for him to fully get on field. But we saw with McBride last year. I think week 7, week 8 is when he really took off. Would not surprise me to see this. I'm not saying he's McBride. I think McBride's a fantastic wide receiver. I think Snott's a solid wide receiver. I don't think he's McBride. Like, let's not get carried away with it. But I think he could be a solid, like, borderline top 12 tight end year in and year out, as long as he gets going, gets snaps and rolling. So, yeah, in that range, if we're talking tight end premium, I would push Shanat up to pick 20, like right behind Trey Benson. He would go into that spot. So he'd be like 208. Like, I'd be fine pulling him there. I have him at 301. I almost put him to 212 just for the show, like we were talking about, just to put him there. But I have him at 301. I think like we talk about, we all like Shanat, the Senator, the Juggernaut, whatever you want to call him. I think he's a very good player. And what it really comes down to is how you feel about Jahan Dotson. I think if you think Jahan Dotson's something, you're probably not going to be into Sannat. If you don't think Jahan Dotson is something, because the last 2 years have been rough for Jahan Dotson, he might not be anything in the NFL. Like, there is a pathway for him to be the second target earner on the team, because Terry McLaurin is getting older. I don't know if they're just going to let him walk in a year or two, but he's there for now. So like clearly he can't be the one because Terry McLaurin is a good NFL wide receiver. But outside of that, their skill position players, like they have Eckler. Who knows what's going on with Eckler? Like the downfall last season was atrocious. So hopefully he comes back and he's good, but it might not be. Like, this is the life of the NFL running backs we talk about with James Conner in Arizona. Sometimes these guys it happens. The cliff comes and they're cooked. And if you're looking at that situation, like, this is how Ben Snott easily could find himself at, well, I don't know about easily, but find himself into a top 12 dynasty tight end relatively soon with the players they have on the offense, because they have a lot of old bodies. People fall off. So it might take a little bit of time with Snott, but yeah, I'm on board. Like, just have patience if you take him. Don't expect him to start. Like, that's not why we're taking anybody that range. Give him some time and let him develop, and he could be a quality NFL player. That's what we're talking about. In this range of picks, I'm all aboard it. I think it's a good pick for him. So
absolutely.
All right. So do you want to jump to, after our top 2 rounds, you want to jump to basically where we are different with consensus on like the guys who are really higher and lower on?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with Ben Snott. I'm 8 picks higher than consensus. Consensus ECR right now is at pick 32, which is mid to late 3rd round, if I'm doing my math correctly.
Late 3rd round.
308. Ben Snott is my 212, right? So he's 24. So I'm 8 picks above consensus on Snott. It sounds like you are too. You'd be 7 picks above consensus if he's your 301.
Yep. Yeah. I'm looking at it right here. He's in that range for me. Newsflash, when we talk about expert consensus rankings, I am very bullish on a few of these guys late in the draft. So we sorted this by like 6 filter difference of picks. Here's the guys I'm 10 picks above or below on. Kamani Vidal, I'm plus 10 picks on. Tyrone Tracy, I'm plus 13 picks on. Dylan Lobby, plus 10. Joe Milton, I'm plus 18 picks on. Kate Stover, plus 10. Frank Gore, Tua's brother, Michael Wiley, Sam Harton, I'm all 10 picks above. On the flip side, I'm 18 spots lower on A.D. Mitchell. I love A.D. Mitchell. I just think his situation sucks. So until I get proven wrong with that, maybe I'll miss. I'm 10 picks lower on Braylon Allen, Malik Washington, Isaac Guerrero. By the way, did you see Isaac Guerrero is wearing 49 in San Francisco? It's immediately over. I mean, you're wearing 49 as a running back. He's cooked.
Second round rookie pick.
I was like, it's over for Isaac Guerrero.
Second round rookie pick. It's coming.
Good Lord. I said, what are you, a fucking fullback, halfback, time blocking tight end? This is the worst thing I've ever seen. But yeah, I'll actually talk about A.D. Mitchell. I think he's a good player, and we saw the video come out where the Colts were very happy to take him, which is also funny because we saw the Jets video where they fist pumps when the Colts took him. So clearly the Jets do not like A.D. Mitchell, right? But I think he's such an upgrade over Alec Pierce. He immediately makes the offense better. So what I think is really good is it actually helps out the quarterback, Anthony Richardson, who I got at the 201 in our league that we just took. I think he's set up to absolutely smash the skill position help they have there because he fills a role. I don't know about fantasy viability. I think it's really hard for anyone outside Pittman to be fantasy viable, and Jonathan Taylor. Maybe it works out. He's a good player. It could happen. I just think him and Josh Downs are kind of eating at those secondary third targets on that offense. They'll be productive NFL players, but like fantasy wise, like I'm just like as talented as I think A.D. Mitchell is, it's just really that one hurt me most. I was like, fudge, all right. Yeah, gotta drop him quite a bit because I just don't see it working out. So Unfortunately, sometimes that happens with fantasy guys in landing spots, and I know we talk about it. Landing spots definitely matter with a few of these players, especially the players with not the best production profiles in the world, like those secondary and third tier guys. Like if they don't get the landing spots, and this is why we talk about a Dylan Lobby or Tyrell Tracy or Kamani Vidal, those guys got the enough landing spot, and that's why they're getting steamed up because there's a pathway for those guys to get into production in year one. And if I could get that in round 3, like I'm smashing the button all day on those guys. I don't really care. It's burned me in the past, like I did this last year with running backs the year before. It will burn you, but at the same point, you could hit on a late round pick. We see people do this all the time with like Tank Dell, Puka Nakua. It doesn't really happen with wide receivers, but the running backs is more particular. I think it's very possible. Who are some of the other guys that you're really lower or higher on?
Braylon Allen, I think you said you were 10 spots lower than consensus. I'm 20 spots lower than consensus. And I love the fact that Braylon Allen is just 20 years old. But he's one of these guys who's just so raw. And now he's buried behind the RB1B in Dynasty, right? In Breece Hall. We know the Jets are in their win now window because of Aaron Rodgers. But there's a lot of guys who are going to stick around for a while. And if you think about post Aaron Rodgers, Braylon Allen has the opportunity to work in with Breece Hall if they switch to kind of like a run heavy scheme. They bring in a rookie or maybe a less established veteran, like these guys are older now, but like a Tyrod Taylor type of, journeyman guy, a Minshew type guy who's, focused on the run, serviceable quarterback. But the fact that, a lot of us like Isaiah Davis, who the Jets also took, the fact that I don't think Izzy Abanikanda is a slouch. I'm not handing Braylon Allen the RB2 in New York right away. He's got a lot to prove. I think he's certainly capable, but that landing spot just absolutely nuked his value for me. So Braylon Allen obviously is off my board. Another one who I'm lower on, who was one of my sleepers, is Malik Washington. Love Malik Washington. Hate the spot because he's immediately the least athletic, weapon in that entire offense, right? You just look at, the 3 backs now. I mean, you can even throw, if he's even still on the team, who's, oh man, I'm blanking on his name. Miami Dolphins, tiny running back who played a little bit in the last few years. Yes. And Ahmed's even, he's going to be more athletic than Malik Washington, even though I think Malik Washington is a great player, right? His value is just completely nuked for me. So he's 7 spots lower than consensus for me, even though, again, he was one of the guys I had higher on my list in terms of sleepers. But Jalen Waddle, we know, is going to be around. The Tyreek Hill retirement rumors, I don't think we can believe any of that right now. And we have to keep in mind that Miami also took Taj Washington in this draft, Malik in the 6th and Taj in the 7th. So again, we're talking about day 3 guys here. Who knows what to believe? But also, I'm not a huge believer in Tua, right? I think Tua has been created by Mike McDaniel, by his weapons, and Malik isn't this offense elevating, quarterback elevating guy. He's a piece who could be a valuable piece. But if if let's say Tyreek Hill does retire next year, we have a problem in Miami. We have targets, but now we have a problem with the offense. Mostert's out the door, right? So automatically you're taking the entire volume of this offense and you're just throwing it out the window next season. What are we doing here? And so I'm not very confident at all that Miami has the ability to kind of sustain this upper tier offense that they're running right now with a couple of older guys who are elite. But Malik Washington, I would have loved him in a situation more like Roma Doomsday landed in, or maybe Washington would have been a nice spot. Somewhere where he can develop and grow and eventually become that number 2 target that we're really seeking in these drafts. But also 6th-round draft capital just kills it for me. I'm out on Malik. How are you feeling on Malik?
Yeah, I just don't even want to draft him, to tell you the truth. Like, PPR management said, like, feels more contingent upside. Yeah, and like, say Tyreek Hill retires. You telling me Miami's not going to add to that room? By the way, they have Jonnu Smith
Oh,
there, who's also a good NFL player too. And he's gonna the thing what Jonnu Smith's gonna do is he's gonna live in that same area the slot guy lives in.
yeah,
So
that's true.
he's gonna carve into that role too. So once they got Jonnu Smith, I was like, unless it's a high profile wide receiver that they're gonna draft in the slot, we talked about like Xavier Worthy or one of those guys, then yeah, I get it. But we're talking about this is like a dart throw for the Miami Dolphins. They're hoping they have something here. But if Tyreek Hill retires, you bet your ass they're going to bring somebody in. Maybe it's just a cheap slot wide receiver, like guys like Tyler Boyd are available. You know what I'm saying? Like they go fill that room with other players. And if it's a quality NFL player, this is the hard thing. Like we talk about with day 3 wide receivers in particular, nothing is guaranteed with them. So they have to be substantially better than who's on the field. If they're not going to earn snaps, and they're not. So it's just like it's difficult. The nice thing for him is that wide receiver core is pretty barren outside Hill and Waddle. So yeah, he could find himself into that slot role. But like if he hits that slot role, what's the upside? Does he get 50 targets in year 1? Like maybe. And if you're talking like 50 targets, it's like that pick you just burn. I mean, you're not burning it because we're talking in like the late 3rd, early 4th, whatever, right? That type of range. I was on the clock with 312 and somebody traded up to that pick. I thought they were gonna take a running back. And they took Malik Washington, and I was like, all right, cool. This deal worked out immensely for me because I was not going to take this guy at all. So, yeah, it's really difficult for these later guys we talk about. Like, for instance, I'm significantly lower on Jaheim Bell in New England. Like, he still has name cachet, but it's around 7, man. Like, you're guaranteed nothing. Like, is he going to absolutely earn a role in that offense? It's possible. Like, we don't really big fan of the tight ends they have there, but he has to be very good. And he has to significantly carve out a role. This is the whole thing with Puka Nacua at the beginning of the year where people are so worried. Until they show it to you consistently, then that's where you kind of take it. You're like, all right, this is a good player. They're going to earn it. But for instance, like Jaheim Bell or Malik Washington, one of these guys, it's set against them where it's just like, man, like the upside feels extremely capped and the floor feels like a 0. So if I'm taking shots in the late 3rd, early 4th, I want to swing for upside where I can actually get a fancy viable player. And this is why I almost primarily go for running backs. Last year was the one exception is because I really like Tank Dell and what his profile and what he did. Outside of that, but he also went round 3. He went a hell of a lot earlier than we're talking about with these round 6, round 7 guys. It's just so hard. So if you have to talk yourself into the talent, the situation, the scheme, all of these things with these players, newsflash, it's probably not going to work out for them. So it's just, this is the NFL, man. People get burnt every year. So yeah, I'm just not that interested in.
Well, let's stay in Miami for a second because another guy I'm significantly lower on who I was loving pre-process is Jalen Wright. Jalen Wright just falling into, again, just a crowded weapons with an offense that is only elite because of 2 players in my mind, and that's Tyreek Hill. And look, love Jalen Waddle, right? But it's obviously running through Tyreek Hill in the passing game, and it's obviously running through Raheem Mostert. Take nothing away from Devon Achane, but Achane is going to be an efficiency guy. I don't believe, and look, let's say Raheem Mostert retires next year or goes down with injury this year, right? And he's eliminated from that backfield. What are we expecting there? And I'll tell you what I'm expecting. I'm expecting Devon Achane to become the Raheem Mostert role. And that doesn't mean, though, that he gets Raheem Mostert level touches, right? I think they need to drastically rethink that offense. I think you're going to see a lot more Jalen Waddle kind of motioning into the backfield in that case. I think you're going to see him take some handoffs. Tyreek Hill on end arounds. You're going to see a lot more screens. They're going to have to functionally change that offense if Raheem Mostert goes down. But Achane will become the 1A, and then Jalen White, becomes the 1B, the Achane role as it exists now. And you're looking at, 8 to 12 touches a game for Jalen Wright. That's if Raheem Mostert goes away. So, for me, look, Jalen Wright, I'm a big fan of the player. He's got home run hitting potential. We know why Mike McDaniel loves him. He's speed on speed on speed. That for me is not working when you have Achane in front of him and then Mostert in front of him. I just think he's buried as well. And he's someone that I wanted to like a lot more, but landing spot just killed it for me.
Yeah, I view it similar to the Green Bay offense because there's 2 guys in front of both of these players. The difference is I just don't think either one of us likes AJ Dillon, and that's the differential between right. So that's the issue. My thing with Mostert is he's been injury prone his entire career except last year. He limited touches. Achane's also a guy who's dealt with injuries, but I've talked about this multiple times. Achane, 1 season in college, had the max touches of 22. Jalen Wright never had more than 13 in a season. Like they're different types of players. Why I'm okay with Wright, like if he would have gone to an offense where like he's behind the Josh Jacobs, like I don't want anything to do with this guy. What he does in Miami is you can live on efficiency, like we've seen it with these backs. I'm fine with it. But yeah, the Achan's gonna be the guy that's the 1A. Like no matter what, he's just a better back than like we talk about, right? I think he could be the 1B, and long term, I think he's a replacement for Mostert, where he gets some of those high efficiency touches and he's a good back. It's the Miami offense that you want the running backs in this offense because we've seen what they could do in small samples. So like that's totally fine. I'm fine making that bet. And that's why I have all three of those guys together. I don't necessarily know if that upside is as high as it is with Corum if something happens to Kyron Williams, or if Marshawn Lloyd, if something happens to Josh Jacobs. I think they have more contingent upside attached to them. But I think the upside's very nice for his. And I think he has a certified higher floor because you can live off of 8 to 10 touches in the Miami offense and be a fancy player.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I'm not sure if you cut out or I cut out. But yeah, for me, like you just really need to make sure that you play the game and you're really looking at kind of these smaller windows, right? You've heard this before. You need to play Dynasty a little bit like redraft in a sense, right? A lot of your league mates will do this. So you really need to be looking at shorter windows in a period of time. It doesn't mean you can't value longer window plays like some of these later round guys we're talking about. You just need to be prepared to insulate them and insulate yourself and your roster with, a tier of guys you're kind of waiting on to develop versus the guys you're actually going to be able to play. That's where taxi squads come into play. That's where deep benches come into play. So you just need to know, your league. You need to know your team. You need to know your play style, like we were talking about before. All of those things are super important. Jesse, did you want to finish the point you were making?
Yeah, I was just saying I'm fine where I have him in the rankings. Like I'm fine making that bet. But like we talk about managers, like knowing yourself, you have to be comfortable making that bet and living with a high efficiency guy who's going to be limited. He's never going to be a workhorse back. That's never what he's going to be. His max range of outcomes is like what we just saw last year at Miami, where he's 10 to 12 touches and he's an efficiency beast like Devon Achane, right? Like that's in his range of outcomes, but you're not getting 20 touches a game. Like that's just not the type of player he is. He didn't profile this. And this is, I think David Willisley makes this point immensely. Like being available and earning touches is a skill. So if you don't show it in college, it's very difficult. Like the James Cook outlier scenario where he got 280 touches last year, that's so rare that almost never happens. So if we expect that from other guys, it's really difficult. You need to hit like the nuts landing spot and the right time, the right position, injuries, all these things that happen for him. So, but I'm fine making the bet in late second on him being a high efficiency, like 1B in the Miami offense long term. That's kind of like why I'm okay making that bet. If you're not, then don't even like waste the pick there. Just go chase a wide receiver or a different running back in that range.
Not for me. Before we probably get into some deep sleepers real quick, and I know we're running long here, I just want to go back because we didn't get a chance to talk about this player, and he deserves a couple of minutes, I think. And it's Brian Thomas Jr., right? Brian Thomas Jr., throughout the process, a lot of people was an early, mid 109, 110 kind of rookie pick. A lot of people had him as their wide receiver 4 off the board. He's now dropped a little bit. For me, he's outside of round 1. He's the number 15 overall. I know for you, he's 10 or 11. I forget exactly where you had him. And I think that's perfectly fine. But the one thing I do want to mention is we're talking about these JSN types earlier. We're talking about Roma Dunze and the concern about targets, right? I think Brian Thomas is in a similar situation. It really just depends on how you value the player. But we saw Christian Kirk just eat up a ton of targets over the middle in the last few years. We saw Evan Ingram become the tight end 2 last year. He was a target monster. We have Gabe Davis there. I'm not scared of Gabe Davis. I don't think Gabe Davis is really anything. I'm trying to get him, give him away for a 3rd round pick at this point on any fantasy teams where I have him left. But, I still think he is the type of guy that can, as we saw in Buffalo, that can take over a game. And can dominate from that perspective every once in a while. Gabe Davis still a decent best ball dart, I think. So you have those guys. And then, let me back up and say landing spots are really interesting for wide receivers because if you have a spot, for example, like the first one I thought of was Washington, but I hesitate to say it because of Austin Eckler. But let's pretend Austin Eckler is totally done, right? you have a tight end who landed there with limited great receivers and limited running backs, right? We want guys who can eventually ascend to become the second target, even the third target on a prolific passing offense. And here, right, if we talk about Brian Thomas Jr., we can assume let's assume a prolific passing offense. Let's assume Trevor Lawrence ascends, he gets it together, they figure it out, right? I don't think Christian Kirk is going anywhere. He's proven he's got that rapport. Evan Ingram is getting a little bit older, okay. All right, so we have two targets that are at least right now above Brian Thomas Jr., but Travis Etienne, right? Trevor Lawrence's longtime college teammate. He's been his teammate for 5-6 years. He's, obviously a main receiving threat out of that backfield and continues to be pretty much the only running back they want to employ in that backfield. He's going to be on the field a ton. And so when you have here now a receiver entering a competition with other receivers for targets, but then the tight end is a high target earner and the running back is a high target earner. This is my issue with Brian Thomas Jr. in his landing spot and why I've knocked him down a few pegs, because in addition to the concerns about maybe he takes plays off and those sorts of things, you can't argue with his athletic profile. He's an absolute monster. But why have you left him there, considering all those things with Jacksonville, the fact that Trevor Lawrence hasn't ascended, they haven't become this prolific passing offense yet. Why are you still so high on Brian Thomas? And how can you convince me to push him back up in the first round?
So I view the Kansas City and Jacksonville situations very similarly, actually. I think obviously Mahomes is a better passer. I'm not saying T.Law is on par with him, but there's good players in both of these offenses. With Kansas City, obviously Travis Kelce, he's better than Evan Ingram. We don't have to really make the comparison. If you want to say he's cooked, whatever. We saw in the playoffs, the guy's still phenomenal. It gets really interesting outside of that. We have Rashee Rice down there, who's, I guess you want to say he's the Christian Kirk of the offense. He's going to do a lot underneath. And Christian Kirk's more of a stretch, but he's going to play in the slot. So those two guys do that. The pathway for both of these guys to be high-end target earners, I honestly just don't see it. I was a little bit more bullish on Xavier Worthy's profile. I just didn't see him being a high-end target earner. And what I see with Brian Thomas is very similar to George Pickens. He's a boom bust risky X prototype wide receiver who's developmental, where I see him being efficient on deep targets and filling a role specifically Jacksonville has not had. That's why they struggled so much with Calvin Ridley, because he's more of a slot flanker and they were playing him X. And this is why it went so horribly wrong for them last year. Brian Thomas can actually fill that role and he could do it. If I'm making a bet between the two of those guys, I'm fine chasing the upside with Brian Thomas, because I saw Trevor Lawrence last year. I saw him. He was a good quarterback. I thought he's been a good guy. I think he could support players in fantasy. We saw him do this with Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, right? Mm-hmm. I just think the upside is similar for both of these players. So that's why they're grouped together for me. And I had them similar pre-draft as well. I had them back to back. So I think the difference for me and you is you're just higher on Xavier Worthy, the player, than Brian Thomas, the player. And I think that's the biggest differential, right? So I don't there's a giant cutoff after wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 4 for me. And it was a big tier, we talked about. Those two guys got the best landing spots. They landed in where they have the potential to step in day one, be impact guys. But a lot of times with these late round wide receivers, we kind of assume too much they're going to push for 120, 104 targets. I don't think either guy's doing that in year one. I think you'd be happy with 80 to 100 targets in year one in those offenses where it's an upward trajectory. They come on the second half of the season, they develop more and more and more. And you're okay, year 2 is when I'm really bullish on these guys, right? They step into bigger roles and do that. So with that profile and where these guys went in the drafts, I think kind of we over it. We did this last year with JSN, with the expectations we put over before they show it. So Quentin Johnson, JSN, Zay Flowers, all those guys that went round 1 last year in that range, I kind of view these guys similar to those type of players where we saw this, and Jaden Reed, but he went a little bit later. They come on the second half of the year and they be impact guys for you. Same thing with Rashee Rice last year. Same thing with Zay Flowers. They develop and they become good NFL players. Now, I don't think any one of those guys is going to be a true alpha, high-end wide receiver 1. That's why I had the 3 wide receivers above them. But with Brian Thomas in that offense and the skill set of what he does, he gives them and upgrades that offense. And I think him and Trevor Lawrence can build a nice pairing. And it honestly wouldn't shock me if he has a better career than Xavier Worthy. I'm just not sure how to view these two guys. So like I'll chase the upside with Brian Thomas. I kind of like these risky boom bust profile wide receivers. I think Worthy probably has a higher floor. I just don't know. Like I'm really cautious on how they're going to use him because I don't know his role in that offense. And they have so many guys that are that slot hybrid flanker role. Like him and Hollywood are very similar players. Rashi Rice is living in the slot. I don't know who's playing the X alpha role, which means either like the MVS, Justin Watson, one of those guys is getting playing time. And if that happens in year one, it's going to be a slow grind for Worthy. So like, I just need to see what they're going to do and how they're going to use him. Like they could do some weird stuff with this offense because it is, one of the better coaches, one of the better quarterbacks, so they can make it work. I'm just a little bit curious to see how it goes. So yeah, I'm fine with Brian Thomas in that range. I think it's more like we talk about our differences between Xavier Worthy and like what he's going to be. I think that's the biggest thing. If I believed in his talent of being high end, like profile learner, and he's like, I knew what the role was going to be out the gate. Yeah, I'd push him into like near the Rome Odunze tier. I just don't know. So that's why I'm a little bit more bullish on him.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not prepared to present my Xavier Worthy rebuttal because that's going to be a whole nother show, and we need to end this show. But I will say, no, wrong. Or I disagree. I'll say I disagree at the moment, but that's going to have to be another show. But I will say this, take this for what it's worth. In our current startup, we're through almost 3 rounds. There's 14 quarterbacks off the board. Trevor Lawrence has not been one of them, and we're at the 311. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous to me. The hate has gone too far. I still think he can develop. I think he's in the right situation. And Brian Thomas, I agree, has landed in a good long-term situation. Again, in the next 2 years, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to materialize. He's going to need to really show that he's the player deserving of that. What was it, 23rd overall pick for Brian Thomas? Yeah. Which maybe it's very possible, but I'm not betting that he's going to be elite right out of the gate. So with that being said, because, again, we're running long and I want to wrap this up. Why don't we just, I've got one in mind. So I can run first unless you've got one in mind too. How about like a late round dart throw sleeper that you're really happy with, comfortable with in the 4th or even 5th round of fantasy drafts where you just want to, take this player, have him on your roster, and regardless of situation or whatever happens, you just believe in the ability for this player to find work and make it on an NFL team and as a viable fantasy piece.
All right, so I'm gonna leave Kamani Vidal for Aaron because that's Aaron's guy, and I know he's like super bullish on him. I'll talk about Tyrone Tracy with the Giants offense. I like Bucky Irving, but I don't really view him much of a sleeper because everybody's talking about his RB1 potential. So like leave him alone. I'll chase a guy that's going a lot lower. I think him and Dylan Lobby are the 2 guys that I'm most interested in, these late round running backs, because I see pathways to production and like staying on the field in year 1. With Tyrone Tracy, like he's really not competing with anyone. I think he's a better actual receiver than Devin Singletary. And I get it, he's older, but he could step in year 1 into an offense. By the way, they have Malik Neighbors. They still need talent. Like we talk about Devin Singletary. Like I think he's a fine NFL back, but he's not the type of back that's going to prevent anyone from stepping through. That's good. Like I get it. He's older. He's 24. He went late, but I like his profile and how he is set up to succeed in the NFL. I see him slowly coming on and being the 3rd down back, like out the gate. Like I think that's why I have him in Lobby similar. Like I view that skill set, and he can earn more and work into that role where he takes up a decent amount of touches throughout the season, and he helps out Daniel Jones or God forbid if Drew Lock's the quarterback, one of those guys. Yeah. Like I know the offense isn't great, but guess what? They can still support running backs. Like we've seen running backs in bad situations do this a lot to go on. I think there's a pathway where he pushes Devin Singletary fairly early in year 1 to be a guy getting a decent amount of work. So in the 4th round of picks, I'm fine throwing a dart on Tyrone Tracy.
I love it. For me, I'm going to stay at the running back position. And I said this a show or 2 ago. I'm going to say it again. It's Rasheen Ali of the Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to keep pounding the table for this guy. First of all, you're going to hear a lot throughout this process. I finally got back into my podcast cycle, and I heard it a few times today. People are pounding the table for Isaac Guerendo, and I don't really know why you're just going to take a shot Yeah, look, he had a decent process, right? Like he advanced his stock and he landed in a nice situation for running backs, but he's buried, right? Long term, we don't know what that San Francisco running back situation looks like. Short term, we don't even know what it looks like. But if CMC gets injured, I don't think Isaac Orendo is the first guy up. So for me, I'm not taking the shot on that. Instead, I'm taking the shot on Rasheen Ali, who is in just as good of an offense, right? With maybe slightly less of an offense, but just as good as maybe a rushing offense, right? Where you have Derrick Henry is the only guy in front of you right now. I think we all love Keaton Mitchell in the fantasy community. He flashed. He looked great last year. We have no idea what he's going to look like returning from injury. We have no idea what that recovery timeline looks like right now. If he's even going to be ready for the start of the season, I think we're assuming he's not going to be, right? So with Rasheen Ali, you have an immediate RB2 behind one of the oldest and kind of more injury prone big running backs who just signed a big deal because, look, Derrick Henry is an absolute beast and a monster. But if you're telling me that the Baltimore Ravens of all team are not going to spell their number one back a little bit with 8 to 10 touches a game from someone else, then you're living in a fantasy world. So I think from the jump, Rasheen Ali is going to have 6 to 8 touches a game. And he's obviously then going to have the opportunity to build on that. He's going to have the ability to kind of work in, and we know what elite rushing quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson do for space in the running game. Rasheen, look, he made Gus Edwards, a 5 yard per carry back, right? And Gus Edwards, for everything that he is as a running back, and he's a damn good one. He's not this elite, YPC back, or he shouldn't be. That's all due to the offense and Lamar Jackson's skill set. And Rasheen Ali, he's going to step in. He should be the RB2 to start. If he looks good in camp, we're going to hear these reports. I think you're going to be very happy having him on your roster in the late 4th or even early 5th. And at the moment, if your rookie drafts ended, there's a good chance he's still on the waivers. So go pick him up.
100%. I'm with you. I think that's a great bet. And like we talk about, if Henry gets injured because he's an older back, they do get injured. Like there is significant upside attack. Like we talk about contingent upside. It's not going to take the job from Henry. Like nobody's saying that, but he could be viable in that role. And I've seen multiple people say he fills that Gus Edwards role perfectly. So like we talk about, like that's a good bet where we're getting these players where you have a guy you're happy. So yeah, 100%. I think those multiple guys. These like I'm not taking the day 3 wide receivers this late. I'm chasing the running backs. Give me all the running backs like we talk about that pathways to potential. So I think those guys. I think Kamani Vidal. I think Dylan Lobby are also interesting bets too. Like those are probably the 4 that I would come up with. There's probably more I'm blanking on, but it's a good group.
Just not Will Shipley.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a rough one for my boy Will. That's like the worst potential place to go where you're like, all right, Saquon Barkley can do it all, and you're not getting on the field. So the only way you get on the field, oh yeah, by the way, they have all these other backs too. So it's just it sucks. Kenneth Gainwell's still there. Like that's just Sometimes guys just they get cooked landing spot. And as much as we wanted to think he was CMC, he was not. Turns out he was not CMC. The NFL told us that is 100% right. He is not CMC. So, yeah, unfortunately, that's how it goes. But yeah, it's just with that, you wanna wrap this up, or we want to keep going?
Yeah, let's wrap it. Yeah, we're done. We're done. So, yeah, fantasyfootballuniverse.com. Right, come check us out. We have a bunch of rookie profiles. In fact, we're just updating all the landing spots now. Those will be done and coming out regularly just for your viewing pleasure. But all those rookie profiles are already up on our website. So please check us out. We're on TikTok posting content daily, YouTube as well, where you can find this and other podcasts. And the article series are going to start coming out soon. We're building the website. We're building the brand as much as possible. Obviously, we're on Twitter everywhere all the time. We apologize for bombarding your feeds if you follow us already. If you don't follow us already, follow us so we can bombard your feeds with all of our content. We promise you that most of it is worthwhile. As with anything, we work on an 80-20 rule, so 20% is going to be absolute garbage. But hey, that's just how things actually shake out. So listen, if you get an 80% great content, then I think it's a win. So listen, follow us. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate you turning in. So for Jesse, for myself, have a great, I don't even know what day it is today, Thursday. Enjoy yourself, and we'll see you next time. Wait, let me
Yeah.
play the thing. Let me play the thing. What do we got? It's gonna be fire. Later, guys.
Oh, yeah.